If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing, the rain fell mercilessly over the Coffee Valley, a mountainous region in rural New York State. Raphael Miller, 38, watched the drops stream down the window of the intercity bus taking him to Sterling. His tired eyes reflected not only the storm outside, but the tempest his life had become over the past 18 months. "Daddy, are we there yet?" Eleanor's sweet voice, his 5-year-old daughter, brought him back to reality. He smiled, adjusting the girl's curly hair. "Almost there, Ellie. About 20 more minutes." The little girl settled into the adapted wheelchair that occupied the reserved space on the bus. Since the accident that took Christine, Raphael's wife and Eleanor's mother, the girl had lost the use of her legs, a tragedy compounded by the bankruptcy of the small construction company Raphael had maintained in Steelton. "Does the house have trees, Daddy?" Eleanor asked, her eyes shining with the typical curiosity of her age, a spark of life that not even the wheelchair could extinguish. "Lots of them, honey. A whole orchard, jaboticaba, guava, mango trees, and space to plant whatever we want," Raphael replied, trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. The truth was, he didn't know exactly what awaited them. The house had been bought at auction for $15,000, literally everything that was left after paying off the debts of the bankrupt company. He had only seen old photos, a 19th-century farmhouse abandoned for years with a considerable plot of land. The real estate agent had been honest about the state of disrepair, but the price was irresistible. Besides, it was the only viable option to get them out of the boarding house, rooms where they had been living since losing their apartment. Raphael was a civil engineer, and before the crisis that destroyed his business, he had built and renovated dozens of houses in the region. His hands knew how to work. That's what he kept telling himself. With hard work, he would turn that place into a home for Eleanor. "Are we going to have chickens?" His daughter's question made Raphael smile genuinely. "Do you want chickens, Princess?" "Yes, and a dog, and a cat, and rabbits, and—" Hold on, Raphael laughed. "Let's start by fixing up the house. Then we'll think about the animals." When they finally got off at the Sterling bus station, the rain had stopped. An elderly man named Mr. Arthur was waiting for them, as arranged by phone. "Are you Raphael, the one who bought the St. Clair estate?" the man asked with a heavy rural New York accent. "That's me." "And this little princess must be Ellie," the man smiled, bending down to be at wheelchair height. "Nice to meet you, young lady." Eleanor gave a shy smile and waved. "I have an adapted car," Mr. Arthur explained. "My late wife also used a wheelchair in her last years. I kept the vehicle, for memories." The journey to St. Clair Estate took about 40 minutes on dirt roads that, after the rain, were in poor condition. Raphael observed the typical Coffee Valley landscape: rolling green hills, old coffee farms, some restored as inns, others abandoned to time. "Yours is quite isolated," Mr. Arthur commented. "The last owners were folks from out of state who came once in a while, but no one's been there for about 5 years. When they finally arrived, Raphael felt a tightening in his chest. The reality was much worse than the photos. The 2-story house with a colonial veranda had parts of its roof compromised, the faded blue paint peeled, revealing the original stucco. Tall weeds dominated what had once been a garden. "Daddy, is this it?" Eleanor's voice sounded hesitant. Raphael swallowed hard. "It is, honey. It looks like an abandoned, enchanted castle, doesn't it? We're going to turn it into our home." Mr. Arthur helped with the few bags they carried. "I'll be back tomorrow with some basic groceries, as we agreed. Are you sure you want to stay here tonight? There's an inn. In town?" "We'll stay," Raphael was firm. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Arthur." As the car drove away, father and daughter were left alone, contemplating their new reality. Raphael pushed Eleanor's chair along an improvised path he cleared through the weeds to the veranda. "Here we go, Ellie. Our new life begins now." As he tried to open the door with the old key he had received at the registry office, Raphael noticed something strange. The lock seemed to have been used recently. There were no cobwebs or the typical dust of a place abandoned for years. "Wait here, Princess," he said, leaving Eleanor on the veranda as he cautiously entered. The interior of the house was surprisingly clean. Not well maintained. There were cracks in the walls, damp stains on the ceiling, broken windows covered with plastic. But clean, and, more surprisingly, there were clear signs of occupation. An old mattress on the living room floor, some clothes neatly folded in a corner, a small makeshift fire in the old fireplace. Raphael felt a shiver down his spine when he noticed smoke still coming from the chimney. "Is anyone here?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. Silence was the only answer, until a noise coming from what seemed to be the kitchen alerted him. Raphael instinctively grabbed a piece of wood from the floor and slowly walked towards the sound. "Who's there? This house is mine now. I bought it legally." He heard whispers. When he reached the old kitchen door, he saw two young women, practically identical, with fear in their eyes. One held a pot as a makeshift weapon. The other was positioned slightly ahead, in a protective stance. "Please don't call the police," said the one in front. We just needed a place to stay." Before Raphael could respond, Eleanor's voice sounded from the veranda. "Daddy, can I come in? It's getting dark, and there are mosquitoes out here." The two young women looked surprised at the door. Raphael lowered the piece of wood, running a hand through his hair in a sign of nervousness. "I'll be right there, Ellie." Then, turning to the young women, "Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?" The one holding the pot slowly lowered it. "I'm Louisa. This is my sister, Leona. Well, I guess we're squatters, technically." "We didn't mean to trespass," Leona added, her voice softer than her sister's. "But we had nowhere to go after our car broke down on the road, about 2 miles from here. We found this abandoned house 3 weeks ago, and—" "Daddy," Eleanor's voice was more insistent. Raphael sighed deeply. His first day in the new house, and he was already facing a completely unexpected situation. The sun was setting quickly, casting orange shadows through the broken windows. In a few hours, it would be completely dark, and he had a 5-year-old daughter in a wheelchair to care for. The two young women seemed as lost as he was. "I'll go get my daughter," he finally said, "and then you're going to tell me exactly who you are and what you're doing here." As he walked back to the veranda to get Eleanor, Raphael wondered how to deal with the situation. Expel the young women, call the police, or perhaps there was another solution. Something told him that fate had placed all of them in that abandoned house for a reason he couldn't yet comprehend. Eleanor's eyes widened when Raphael brought her into the house, and she saw the two identical women. Standing at the kitchen entrance, she showed no fear, only an innocent curiosity. "Are you twins? I've never met real twins," the girl exclaimed, moving her wheelchair closer without waiting for her father's permission. Louisa and Leona exchanged a disconcerted glance before smiling shyly at the child. "We are," Leona replied, bending down to be at Eleanor's height. "I'm Leona, and she's Louisa." "How do we know who's who?" Eleanor asked with the typical honesty of children. Leona smiled, showing a small birthmark near her left eye. "I have this here, see?" And Louisa's voice is a little deeper. Raphael watched the interaction with a mix of apprehension and surprise. Eleanor was usually shy with strangers since the accident, but she seemed instantly comfortable with the sisters. "Do you live here?" Eleanor continued. An awkward silence filled the room. Raphael cleared his throat. "Actually, Ellie, this is our house now. The ladies were, looking after it for us." "Look, we can explain." Louisa took the lead, seeming more assertive than her sister. "We came from Kingston. We were heading home after trying our luck in New York City for a few months when our car broke down on the road about 2 miles from here. We didn't have money for repairs or for a hotel. We saw this abandoned house and decided to spend one night, then another, and another. We tried to keep everything clean," Leona added. "We fixed what we could. That front window was broken, we put plastic to keep the rain out. The back door was falling off. We redid the hinges with what we found in the shed." Raphael's gaze swept across the room, noticing the small repairs. A carefully glued broken vase, loose floorboards renailed, walls swept free of cobwebs. "Why didn't you seek help in town?" he asked. The twins exchanged glances again, communicating silently as only very close siblings can. "We're a little wary of asking for help," Louisa finally said. "Our situation is complicated." "I'm hungry, Daddy," Eleanor interrupted, oblivious to the tension of the adult conversation. Raphael looked out the window. It was getting dark quickly, and they had no food, no properly working electricity, no beds. "We have food," Leona offered quickly. "It's not much, but we can share. There's rice, beans, and some vegetables we planted in the back garden." "You planted a garden?" Raphael asked, surprised. "We needed to eat," Louisa shrugged. "And the soil here is good. We also collected rainwater for drinking and washing. The upstairs bathroom is partially working. We managed to do some repairs to the plumbing." Raphael ran a hand over his face, feeling his unshaven beard. The situation was absurd. He had spent his last resources on that house, expecting to find it empty, albeit dilapidated. Instead, he found 2 women living there, who apparently had done more for the property in 3 weeks than he expected to accomplish in 3 months. "Don't you have family? No one who can help?" he asked. Leona's face clouded over. "Our mother got sick. Cancer. We spent everything we had on treatment, but still she—" Her voice trailed off. "We lost our house in Kingston because of debts," Louisa completed, holding her sister's hand. "We went to New York City to try for jobs, but only got temporary work paying for a tiny, overpriced apartment. When the money ran out, we decided to go back to New York State, try to start over there. That's when the car broke down." "I'm sorry," Raphael murmured, recognizing in the young woman's eyes the same desperation he saw in the mirror every morning. "Daddy, can I see the garden tomorrow?" Eleanor asked, tugging at her father's shirt sleeve. Raphael looked at his daughter, then at the twins, and made a decision that would change the course of all their lives. "Let's do this. You can stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk more and see what to do." The relief on the sisters' faces was visible. "Thank you," they said almost in unison. Dinner was prepared by Leona, who showed skill in the improvised kitchen. Using an old wood-burning stove they had managed to get working, she prepared a surprisingly tasty rice with vegetables. They ate by candlelight, as the house's electricity was limited to a few points. During the meal, Raphael learned more about the twins. Both had graduated in business administration with full scholarships from a federal grant program. Leona had a specialization in gastronomy, while Louisa was passionate about furniture restoration and decoration. They spoke enthusiastically about their dreams, interrupted by their mother's illness and subsequent financial crisis. "What about you?" Louisa asked as she helped Eleanor with her plate. "How did you end up here?" Raphael hesitated, but ended up telling his story. The small construction company in Steelton that went bankrupt during the economic recession. The loss of Christine in a car accident, which also left Eleanor paraplegic. The months living in cheap boarding houses, struggling to adapt spaces to his daughter's needs. "This house was my last resort," he concluded. "I spent everything I had. The idea was to renovate it gradually, making it accessible for Ellie, and maybe open a business in the region. I'm an engineer. I know how to build." The sisters listened with genuine attention. Eleanor, tired from the journey, began to doze in her chair. "We need to prepare a place for you to sleep," Leona said, noticing the girls' fatigue. "We'll sleep downstairs," Louisa offered promptly. "There's a room on the ground floor that we adapted. We put a mattress on the floor. You can have it. It's better for Eleanor than climbing stairs." Raphael accepted the offer, though he felt strange being accommodated by 2 squatters in his own house. The twins quickly tidied the room, changing the worn sheets for others, a little less used but clean. As Raphael put Eleanor to bed, he could hear the sisters whispering in the living room, probably discussing what they would do the next day when they would have to leave the house. Lying on the mattress next to his sleeping daughter, Raphael contemplated the damp-stained ceiling. The day had been surreal. He remembered his father's words. "Life rarely follows the script we write for it." In the middle of the night, he was awakened by thunder. A new storm had formed. He heard the sound of dripping and then hurried footsteps. He carefully got up so as not to wake Eleanor and went to the door. In the hallway, he found Louisa placing buckets and pots under the leaks. Their eyes met in the semi-darkness. "Sorry if I woke you," she whispered. "When it rains heavily, the roof leaks in a few spots." "Let me help," he offered, grabbing one of the buckets. They worked in silence for a few minutes, positioning containers to collect the incoming water. At one point, both reached for the same bucket, and their hands touched briefly. A small shock, which neither of them mentioned. "You know," Raphael finally said as they watched the rain fall, "you've done a good job keeping this house standing." Louisa smiled shyly. "We did what we could. We like it here, despite everything. There's something special about this place." "There really is," he agreed, surprised to realize that he genuinely felt it too. The next morning, Raphael woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter. He followed the sounds to the kitchen, where he found Eleanor sitting at the table, with Leona braiding her hair and Louisa preparing breakfast. "Daddy!" Eleanor exclaimed happily. "Leona knows how to braid hair just like Mommy used to, and Louisa said she's going to show me the garden after breakfast." The twins seemed embarrassed, as if they had been caught doing something wrong. "I hope you don't mind," Leona said. "She woke up early and we found her here in the kitchen trying to reach the sink." Raphael observed the scene for a moment. His daughter seemed happier and more animated than she had been in months. The twins, despite their precarious situation, showed a dignity and strength that he admired. "I was thinking," he said, accepting the mug of coffee Louisa offered him, "that maybe we can come to an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" Louisa asked, sitting at the kitchen table with a cautious expression. Raphael took a sip of coffee before answering, organizing his thoughts. The decision he was about to make might seem crazy, but something inside him said it was the right path. "You can continue living here, temporarily," he began. "In return, you help me renovate the house." The twins exchanged surprised glances. "Are you serious?" Louisa questioned. "I am. I'm an engineer. I have technical knowledge, but I'll need help with the manual labor. You've shown skill in keeping this place running. I think we can help each other." "But we don't have money to pay rent," Leona observed. "I'm not asking for money," Raphael clarified. "I'm proposing a trade, work for lodging. We'll make this place truly habitable for all of us." Eleanor, who had been following the conversation intently despite her young age, excitedly interjected, "So they're going to stay with us, Daddy, forever?" Raphael smiled, affectionately ruffling his daughter's hair. "For now, Ellie. We'll start with a week, see how it works, and then decide the next steps." Mr. Arthur arrived shortly after, bringing the promised groceries and basic tools Raphael had ordered. The old man didn't hide his surprise at finding the twins, but merely raised his grey eyebrows when Raphael briefly explained they were acquaintances who were helping with the house. With the supplies and tools, the real work began. Raphael made a detailed survey of the property, listing priorities: roof, electrical installation, plumbing, and adaptations for Eleanor's accessibility. During that first week, a routine began to establish itself. They woke up early, had breakfast together, and divided the day's tasks. Leona naturally took over the cooking and the expansion of the small garden. Louisa proved skillful with manual work, helping Raphael with structural repairs. Eleanor, in turn, flourished in the company of the twins. Leona taught her about the plants in the garden, while Louisa let her supervise the renovations, giving her small responsibilities like holding nails or choosing colors for the rooms. On the seventh day, as the week of the agreement was ending, Raphael contemplated the already visible progress. The roof no longer leaked, electricity worked throughout the house, and a rainwater harvesting system was almost complete. More importantly, he had implemented the first adaptations for Eleanor: a ramp at the house entrance and grab bars in the bathroom. "So?" Louisa's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was at the veranda door, watching him with an inquiring expression. "Our week is over today." Raphael contemplated the woman in front of him. In just 7 days, he had discovered her determination, intelligence, and work ethic. The sisters had proven themselves not only useful, but genuinely concerned about Eleanor's well-being. "What do you think about extending the agreement?" he proposed. "You seem to like it here." "We do," Louisa admitted, sitting next to him on the veranda steps. "It's strange to say that about a place we squatted in, but we feel at home here. Then stay, Raphael said simply. Louisa looked at him intensely. Why? Why do you trust two strangers you found living illegally in your house? Because you're not strangers anymore, he replied, and because Eleanor has smiled more this week than in the last 6 months. The conversation was interrupted by animated shouts from the backyard. Leona and Eleanor had found a bird's nest in one of the trees and were observing the chicks from a safe distance, with the wheelchair strategically positioned under the shade. Your daughter is amazing, Louisa commented, watching the scene. So strong for someone so small. She is my strength, Raphael confessed. On the hardest days when I lost everything and thought I couldn't go on, it was her smile that kept me going. In the following weeks, the house and its inhabitants underwent a gradual transformation. St. Clair Estate, as it was officially called, was reborn from the ashes. Raphael found temporary work as a construction supervisor in town, bringing in some money for the most urgent renovations. Louisa occasionally accompanied him, learning more about construction and restoration. Leona, in turn, began selling cakes and savories for small local events, using the now renovated farm kitchen. One day, after almost 2 months of living together, Raphael returned from work and found something that left him speechless. A wooden wheelchair, smaller and lighter than Eleanor's, perfectly adapted for a child. We made it together, Leona explained, while Louisa showed Eleanor how the new chair worked. We found a manual online and adapted it with what we had. It's not perfect, but it's easier to maneuver on the farm's terrain. Raphael watched his daughter testing the new chair, maneuvering it with more ease around the yard, her face lit up by the joy of newfound independence. Something broke inside him at that moment, a barrier he had built around his heart since losing Christine. Thank you, he said, his voice choked. You have no idea what this means. That night, after Eleanor fell asleep, the 3 adults sat on the newly renovated veranda, drinking cheap wine and contemplating the starry sky of rural New York State. The conversation flowed with the naturalness of people who were no longer strangers, but were still discovering layers of each other. I never asked how you ended up in engineering, Leona commented, addressing Raphael. My father was a bricklayer, he explained. I grew up on construction sites. When I got into college, it was natural to follow that path. What about you two? 2 business administrators. Our mother worked in a restaurant, Louisa recounted. She started as a waitress and ended up as a manager. She always said we needed to study to have our own business someday. You graduated and then what exactly happened? Raphael asked, realizing there were still gaps in the sisters' story. Leona lowered her gaze to her wine glass. Mom got sick in our senior year of college. The company's health plan denied coverage for the treatment, claiming a pre-existing condition. We filed a lawsuit, but everything happened very fast, Louisa completed. We spent all our savings on alternative treatments. When she passed, we discovered she had mortgaged the house to pay medical bills. We lost everything in a matter of months. Raphael nodded in silence, understanding the twins' pain. Everyone there carried scars. Everyone knew the bitter taste of loss. I think we can turn this house into something special, he said after a long silence. Not just a place to live, but maybe a business. I was thinking of taking advantage of the Coffee Valley location for something geared towards rural tourism. Louisa's eyes lit up with interest. That would be perfect. The region already attracts visitors with its old coffee farms. We could offer something authentic, a real farm experience with Leona's homemade food. And lodging in restored rooms, Raphael continued, getting excited about the idea. We can use sustainable renovation techniques, make everything accessible for people with reduced mobility, something rare in the region. An inclusive inn, Leona summarized, smiling. I can already imagine the menu with products from our garden. The conversation extended into the night, with ideas flowing freely. For the first time in a long time, the 3 tasted the sweet flavor of hope. They weren't just surviving, they were starting to dream again. The next morning, Raphael woke up early and found Louisa already awake, sketching something at the kitchen table. I couldn't sleep, she explained, showing him sketches for the house renovation. I kept thinking about the inn project. He leaned in to get a better look at the drawings. impressed by her talent and vision. Their faces were close as they discussed project details. For a moment their eyes met, and something silent passed between them, a possibility yet unstated. The moment was interrupted by Eleanor calling from her room. When Raphael went to her, he found her sitting in bed, combing an old doll Leona had restored for her. "Daddy," the girl said with the peculiar seriousness she sometimes displayed, "I like it here. Can we stay forever?" "We're trying, Princess," he replied, helping her transfer to her wheelchair. "And Louisa and Leona are staying too?" "If they want to." "I want them to stay," Eleanor declared, determined. "Louisa looks at you the way Mommy used to look in the photos." Raphael's heart quickened at his daughter's innocent comment. "What do you mean, Ellie?" "With shiny eyes," she simply replied. "Can I have breakfast now? Leona promised to teach me how to make bread today." As he pushed his daughter's wheelchair to the kitchen, Raphael reflected on how, in just 2 months, their lives had become so naturally intertwined with those of the twins. What had begun as a pragmatic agreement was transforming into something deeper, still indefinable, but undeniably real. That afternoon, as they worked together adapting one of the rooms for Eleanor, with colors chosen by her and a window low enough for her to see the garden from her bed, Raphael watched Louisa working. Her precise movements as she painted, her dedication to small details, her easy laughter at Eleanor's jokes. He realized then that he wasn't just rebuilding a house, he was rebuilding a family. 4 months had passed since Raphael and Eleanor arrived at St. Clair Estate. Spring in the Coffee Valley brought a special color to the place, with laden jaboticaba trees and wildflowers dotting the path leading to the now almost unrecognizable house. The colonial veranda had been completely restored, with the original blue paint rescued after Louisa found traces of the original color under layers of peeling paint. A wide, firm ramp replaced the main entrance steps, allowing Eleanor to move freely between the house and the front garden, where a raised bed had been built especially for her to grow her own flowers. On a particularly pleasant Saturday afternoon, Leona organized a picnic in the restored orchard. On a checkered tablecloth, she laid out a complete meal: savory pies, homemade breads, jams made with fruit from the property, and a still-warm cornmeal cake. "This is amazing, Lee," Raphael praised, savoring a slice of the vegetable pie. "If the inn doesn't work out, you could open a restaurant." Leona smiled, adjusting the straw hat she wore to protect herself from the sun. "I've been thinking about that, actually. Not a full restaurant, but a catering service. I've already received a few invitations after I made the savories for Mr. Arthur's granddaughter's birthday." "That would be perfect," Louisa opined, braiding flowers into Eleanor's hair. "You always had a knack for it. Remember how Mum used to say your hands were blessed in the kitchen?" A comfortable silence followed the mention of the twins' mother. Over time, the painful memories had begun to give way to happy ones, both for the sisters and for Raphael, who occasionally shared stories about Christine with the twins, something he couldn't do before. "Finished," Louisa exclaimed, showing the result of the floral braids in Eleanor's hair. "You look like a forest princess." "I want to see," the girl asked, turning to Raphael. "Daddy, take a picture with your phone." Raphael captured the moment, observing how his daughter seemed increasingly happy and adapted to this new life. The shy and withdrawn Eleanor, who had arrived there months ago, was replaced by a confident child who had found ways to overcome physical limitations with creativity and determination. After the picnic, Louisa and Raphael headed to the restored shed, where they worked on renovating old furniture found on the property and in the surroundings. This had become their personal project, giving new life to abandoned pieces, just as the house had given new life to all of them. "I think this wardrobe will be perfect for the blue room," Louisa commented, carefully sanding the solid wood of a 19th century piece. "We just need to adjust the height of the hangers so they're accessible from a wheelchair." Raphael watched her work, admiring not only her manual skill, but the way she naturally thought about accessibility in everything she did. It wasn't forced or obligatory. It had become part of her worldview. "You know what I thought?" he said, approaching to help her with the upper part of the furniture. "We could start documenting all these adaptations we're making, Create a practical accessibility guide for old houses. An inclusive renovation manual? Louisa's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. That would be incredible. We could share it online, maybe create a blog associated with the inn. Exactly. Show that historical heritage and accessibility aren't mutually exclusive concepts. They worked side by side for the rest of the afternoon, with the physical proximity intensifying the connection growing between them. Occasionally, their hands touched while reaching for the same tool, and the contact, once accidental, now seemed to last a little longer than necessary. When the sun began to set, they sat at the shed door to contemplate the orange and pink horizon over the Coffee Valley hills. "I never imagined I'd end up here," Louisa confessed, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled. "When our car broke down on the road, I thought, it was the end, another blow of fate. And what do you think now?" She turned to face him. "That sometimes we need to lose our way to find the right path." The look they exchanged carried the weight of all unsaid words, all the feelings silently growing between them. Raphael felt an almost irresistible urge to get closer, but hesitated. He still carried Christine's ghost, still feared that any step in that direction would be a betrayal of his wife's memory. They walked back to the house together, but in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts and unresolved feelings. That night, after putting Eleanor to bed, Raphael found Leona alone in the kitchen, preparing dough for the next day's bread. "Has Louisa gone to sleep?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of the tea she had prepared. "Yes," Leona replied, without taking her eyes off the dough she was kneading diligently. She seemed thoughtful. Raphael nodded, recognizing the same state in himself. "Can I ask a personal question?" Leona continued, now looking directly at him. "You two, is something happening, isn't it?" The direct question caught him by surprise. I don't quite know how to answer that." "You don't have to answer," she said with a gentle smile. "I just wanted you to know that Louisa deserves to be happy. She always took care of me, of our mother, always put others first. If there's a chance for happiness for you two, don't waste it out of fear or guilt." Leona's words stayed with Raphael all night, as he tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. By morning, a decision had been made in his heart, though he still didn't know exactly how to act. The opportunity came a few days later when they received a visit from a potential investor for the inn project. Mark Thompson, a regional businessman interested in the idea of sustainable and inclusive tourism, spent the day getting to know the property and discussing partnership possibilities. "You have something unique here," Mark commented at the end of the visit, as he savored a special coffee prepared by Leona. "The combination of historical heritage with accessibility and sustainability is exactly what the ecotourism market is looking for. I'm willing to make a formal investment proposal." The news was received with enthusiasm, especially by Louisa, who had dedicated herself intensely to the project. When Mark left, promising to send the preliminary documents the following week, a small celebration formed in the house's living room. "We did it," Louisa whispered to Raphael, as they toasted with cheap wine. "It's really happening." That night, after the celebrations, Raphael found Louisa alone on the veranda, contemplating the stars with a serene expression. "May I join you?" he asked. "Always," she replied, moving to make space on the wooden bench they had restored together. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just feeling each other's presence in the warm spring night. "There's something I want to say," Raphael finally began, gathering courage. "These last few months have changed my life in ways I never imagined. Not just the house, the inn project, but you." Louisa turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I have feelings for you," he continued, the words now flowing more easily, "and it scared me for a long time. I felt like I was betraying Christine's memory, like I had no right to happiness after everything that happened. And now?" she asked softly. "Now I realize that life goes on, that the heart has an infinite capacity to love, without diminishing previous loves." He took her hand, feeling the texture of the small calluses formed by manual labor. "I don't know where this will lead us, but I know I want to find out, if you want to too." Louisa's answer came in the form of a soft, almost shy kiss, which carried all the certainty that words could not express. When they separated, both smiled with the lightness of someone finally letting go of a burden. "Does that mean Louisa is going to be my mom now?" The question came from the veranda door where Eleanor was watching, the scene with childish curiosity. Dressed in her unicorn pajamas and with her favorite doll in her lap, she seemed to have just woken up. Raphael and Louisa exchanged glances, momentarily unsure how to respond. It was Louisa who found the words, "It means I'll always take care of you and your dad if you let me, and that you two are very special to me." Eleanor considered the answer for a moment, with the seriousness that sometimes surprised adults. "Okay," she finally said, with the simplicity of children. "You make Daddy smile more." Raphael got up to pick up his daughter, bringing her to sit with them on the bench. The three stayed there, embraced under the starry sky, forming the portrait of a family not defined by blood or conventions, but by daily choices of love and mutual care. The next day, the news of the relationship was met by Leona with a knowing smile that said, "It's about time." The house's dynamic naturally adjusted to the new reality, with Louisa eventually moving into Raphael's room while life continued its course. The inn project progressed rapidly after Mark's investment. The main house was almost fully restored and the construction of the first adapted chalets for lodging had begun. Leona, in turn, officially started her catering business, using the farm kitchen as her base of operations, while awaiting the completion of the professional kitchen planned for the inn. One Sunday morning, as they prepared for lunch with Mark and other potential partners, an unexpected visitor arrived at St. Clair Estate. The mechanic from the neighboring town brought the twins' old car, finally repaired after months of intermittent work. "I got all the parts as promised," he announced, handing the keys to Leona. "It's not the prettiest, but it'll run for a few more years." The sisters observed the vehicle with a mix of emotions. It was a symbol of their previous life, of the moment everything had changed. "What are we going to do with it?" Leona asked, twirling the keys in her hand. Louisa looked at Raphael and Eleanor, who were watching the scene from the veranda. Her heart already knew the answer. "We'll keep it," she replied. "It could be useful for the inn, for emergencies, or for picking up guests at the bus station." The answer was simple, but it carried a deep meaning. There were no plans to leave. St. Clair Estate, found by chance in a moment of desperation, had truly become the home they all sought. Raphael embraced Louisa beside him, seeing the car as a reminder of how much their lives had changed in such a short time. From strangers under the same roof to a family united by choice, not by obligation. The path had been unexpected, but fate seemed finally clear and promising. That night, as Eleanor showed everyone the drawings she had made to decorate her room at the inn, Raphael realized that, for the first time in a long time, he no longer felt that constant anxiety about the future. In its place, there was the quiet certainty of someone who had finally found their way back home. The dream of the inclusive inn quickly took shape. With Mark's investment, St. Clair Estate transformed daily. The 3 chalets designed by Raphael were almost ready, each with specific accessibility features, but without losing the rustic charm that matched the main house. On a Wednesday morning, while supervising the installation of tactile paving for visually impaired guests on the path between the chalets, Raphael received an unexpected call. "Hello? Raphael Miller?" an unknown female voice asked. "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is Dr. Patricia Vance from St. Luke's Hospital in Los Angeles. I'm calling regarding your daughter, Eleanor Miller." Raphael's heart raced. "Has something happened to Ellie?" "No, sir, your daughter is well as far as I know. In fact, I'm calling about a new experimental treatment for spinal cord injuries that we are developing. Your name appeared in our system because Dr. Edward Moore, who treated your daughter after the accident, referred her case to our program." Raphael sat on the nearest bench, trying to process the information. "What kind of treatment?" "Stem cell therapy combined with neurostimulation. We've had very promising results in cases similar to Eleanor's. I can't promise a full recovery, but there's a possibility of significant gains in mobility." "And how would it work?" "It would be a 6-month treatment in Los Angeles. Eleanor would initially be hospitalized for 3 weeks, then continue with daily outpatient therapies." 6 months in Los Angeles. The prospect of leaving the farm, the almost ready in Louisa and Leona, made Raphael feel a tightening in his chest. But the possibility, however remote, of Eleanor regaining some movement. "I'd need to talk to my daughter and my family," he finally said. "When do you need an answer?" "The program starts in 1 month. I can send all the documentation and studies by email for you to review carefully." After hanging up, Raphael remained seated for long minutes, looking at the horizon without truly seeing it. That's how Louisa found him. "Is everything okay? The builder is asking about the finish for the adapted bathroom," she said, approaching him. Noticing Raphael's distant expression, she sat beside him. "Did something happen?" Raphael shared the content of the call, watching emotions pass across Louisa's face: surprise, hope, and finally a shadow of concern. "Los Angeles and for 6 months," she murmured. "Yes. It's an incredible opportunity for Ellie." "I know." The silence that followed contained all the unasked questions. What would happen to them? To the inn? To the new family they had formed? "We need to talk to Ellie first," Raphael decided. "It's her body, her life. She needs to be part of this decision, even if she's so small." Louisa nodded, squeezing his hand. "I agree. And Raphael, no matter what you decide, I'll be here. We'll find a way." The conversation with Eleanor happened that same night after dinner. With all possible delicacy, Raphael explained about the new treatment, the possibilities, and what it would mean for all of them. "Could I walk again?" Eleanor asked, her big brown eyes fixed on her father. "The doctors can't promise that, Princess, but there's a chance you could regain some movement, perhaps stand with support, maybe even take a few steps with a walker." The girl remained silent for a long moment, processing the information in the way a 6-year-old can. "But we'd have to leave here?" she finally asked, looking at Louisa and Leona, who were part of the conversation. "For a while," Raphael replied. "I would go with you to Los Angeles. We would stay there during the treatment." "And Louisa? And Leona? And the inn? And my garden?" The questions came out quickly, revealing the little girl's concerns. It was Leona who stepped forward, kneeling beside Eleanor's wheelchair. "Your garden will be waiting for you when you come back. I promise I'll take good care of it. And the inn will be here too." "I could visit you in Los Angeles," Louisa added, though everyone knew that with the inn about to open, it would be difficult to be away for long periods. Eleanor considered everything for a moment, with a seriousness that surprised the adults. "I don't want to go," she finally declared. "Ellie," Raphael began, "I know it's scary, but—" "I'm not scared," the girl interrupted. "I like how I am. I have my special chair that Daddy and Louisa made. I have my raised garden. I have my friends who come to visit me. In Los Angeles, I'll be far from all that." Raphael exchanged glances with Louisa and Leona, unsure how to proceed. Part of him wanted to insist, to convince his daughter to try the treatment that could change her life. Another part admired the confidence with which Eleanor accepted herself exactly as she was. "We can think about it a bit more," he suggested finally. "We don't have to decide today." In the days that followed, the issue hung over the family like a storm cloud on the horizon. Raphael researched the treatment exhaustively, spoke by phone with the doctors involved, and discussed possibilities with Louisa during long nights. "What if I went with you?" she suggested in one of those conversations. "We could postpone the inn's opening." "We can't ask that of Mark. He's already invested a lot," Raphael replied. "Besides, Leona wouldn't be able to manage everything alone." The solution seemed increasingly difficult, pitting Eleanor's future against the project they had built together. The tension began to affect everyone, especially Louisa and Raphael, whose relationship was still too new to face such a prolonged separation. It was during this impasse that fate, once again, intervened unexpectedly. One Sunday afternoon, while Leona supervised a small renovation in the main house's kitchen, one of the workers accidentally discovered a small hidden passage behind a false wall. In the revealed space, they found an old chest containing time-yellowed documents and a small jewelry box. "These are farm documents," Mr. Arthur explained, called in a hurry to help decipher the old papers. From what I'm seeing, this property was much larger originally. It was divided at some point, but it seems there was a problem with the registration. Raphael and Louisa examined the documents carefully, trying to understand their meaning. If I'm interpreting correctly, Raphael said after hours poring over the papers with the help of a lawyer friend of Mark's, part of the land we thought belonged to the neighboring farm actually belongs to St. Clair legally, including the spring, and approximately 50 more acres. That would change everything, Louisa murmured. With the spring, we'd have our own water. We could expand the inn, build more chalets. The discovery of the documents, and especially the small box of antique jewelry, later valued as 19th century pieces of considerable worth, brought a new perspective to the situation. We can use the money from the jewelry for the treatment, Louisa proposed that night as they discussed the new possibilities. We'd rent an adapted apartment in Los Angeles near the hospital. I could alternate with Leona, spending a few weeks there, others here supervising the inn. The solution seemed viable, but there was still one obstacle: Eleanor's resistance to the treatment. It was at this moment that Charlotte, a 12-year-old girl, the daughter of one of the employees who helped clean the farm, entered the equation. Charlotte also used a wheelchair since she suffered a car accident 3 years earlier. She had met Eleanor during visits to the farm with her mother, and the two had developed an immediate friendship, despite the age difference. One afternoon when Charlotte was visiting the farm, Raphael found her talking intently with Eleanor in the adapted garden. "You know, Ellie," the older girl was saying, "I didn't want to do physical therapy at first either. I thought it wouldn't help, that it was just tiring." "And did it help?" Eleanor asked, adjusting one of the flowers in her pot. "It did. Look." Charlotte maneuvered her chair closer, and to Eleanor's surprise managed to move her feet slightly. "I can't walk yet, but I can feel my legs, and that's already amazing. I can transfer myself from the chair to the bed, alone, shower without as much help." Raphael observed the conversation without intervening, realizing that Charlotte could explain the advantages of the treatment in a way that he, as an adult and father, could not. "I would have to go to Los Angeles," Eleanor commented, still hesitant. "Away from Louisa, Leona, the inn." "But you'd come back," Charlotte argued. "And maybe you'd come back doing more things by yourself. Isn't it cool to be more independent?" The seed had been planted. That night during dinner it was Eleanor who brought up the subject. "Daddy, I changed my mind. I want to try the treatment in Los Angeles." The girl's decision surprised everyone. Raphael knelt beside his daughter's wheelchair. "Are you sure, Princess? What made you change your mind?" "Charlotte showed me that I can come back doing more things by myself. And," she looked at Louisa and Leona, "Louisa said you'll take care of my part of the inn while I'm away. When I come back, I want to be able to help more." The adults exchanged glances, moved by the little girl's maturity. "Let's do this," Louisa proposed, holding Eleanor's hand. "We'll all go to Los Angeles for the start of the treatment. Leona and I will stay there with you for the 3 weeks of hospitalization. Then we'll take turns visiting, and we'll create an inn diary with photos and videos for you to follow everything from here." "And I can send videos of my exercises?" Eleanor exclaimed, cheering up at the idea. Raphael felt a lump in his throat as he observed how, once again, they were finding strength to overcome an obstacle together. The makeshift family they formed would face temporary separation, but the bonds were already strong enough to withstand the distance. The 2 weeks that followed were filled with intense preparations. Raphael and Louisa organized the logistics of the temporary move to Los Angeles, while Leona accelerated preparations for the inn's opening, which would happen even with the absence of part of the family. On the eve of their departure, they held a small dinner in the farm garden, with decorative lights hanging from the trees and the table set with the best dinnerware they had found in the old house. They invited Mr. Arthur, Mark and his wife Charlotte and her mother, and other friends they had made in the region. "A toast," Mark proposed, raising his glass. "To the bravest and most determined family I've ever known. May the distance be only physical and temporary, and may the future bring even more achievements for all of you." As the glasses clinked under the starry sky of the Coffee Valley, Raphael observed the faces around him. Louisa, with whom he now shared not only a project, but also his heart. Leona, whose quiet strength had become a pillar for all of them. and Eleanor, his little warrior, whose eyes reflected not fear of the unknown but the expectation of new possibilities. That night would be etched in everyone's memory as the eve of a new journey, challenging, uncertain, but faced with the certainty that, no matter the outcome of the treatment in Los Angeles, they had built something precious and lasting on the lands of St. Clair Estate, a true home. The next morning, as the car that would take them to the bus station pulled away down the dirt road, Eleanor looked out the back window, watching the house grow smaller and smaller in the distance. In her lap, she carried a small photo album prepared by Leona, documenting the transformation of the farm and, more importantly, of the family that had found its place there. "We're coming back, right, Daddy?" she asked, her voice mixing hope with a little apprehension. Raphael, holding Louisa's hand in the front seat, smiled at his daughter through the rearview mirror. "Of course we are, Princess. We always come home." St. Clair Estate was left behind temporarily, but what they had built there, not just in bricks and wood, but in bonds of affection and daily choices of love, traveled with them, strong enough to cross any distance. Los Angeles proved to be a completely different world for Eleanor. From the adapted apartment they had rented in the Silver Lake neighborhood, she watched fascinated the sea of buildings that stretched as far as the eye could see, so different from the green hills and open sky of the Coffee Valley. The treatment began as planned. The 3 weeks of hospitalization were the most difficult. Painful procedures, uncertainties, Raphael's anxiety, which, despite trying to hide it, showed in his tired eyes. The presence of Louisa and Leona was fundamental in this initial phase, taking turns caring for Eleanor and providing the emotional support everyone needed. When it was time for Leona to return to the farm to supervise the inn's opening, the goodbyes were emotional. "I'll be back in 3 weeks, she promised, hugging her sister, "and I'll bring an album full of photos of the first guests." The adaptation to life in the big city was gradual. Raphael found a job as a consultant at a construction company specializing in accessible projects, using the experience he had gained at the farm. Eleanor was enrolled in an inclusive school near the hospital, where she quickly made new friends, although she spoke daily via video call with Charlotte and other friends from the valley. The intensive physical therapy sessions and experimental treatments continued their course. Progress was slow, almost imperceptible day by day, but carefully recorded by the doctors. Small gains in sensitivity, minimal movements that were previously impossible. Each achievement was celebrated as a great victory. Louisa traveled regularly between Los Angeles and the Coffee Valley, dividing her time between her love for Raphael and Eleanor and her responsibility for the inn, which surprisingly had become an immediate success. St. Clair Estate, inclusive inn, quickly gained prominence in specialized tourism media, being mentioned in reports on accessibility and sustainability. "We have reservations for the next 3 months, Louisa said animatedly during one of her visits, showing photos of the occupied chalets and blooming gardens. "The Ministry of Tourism visited us and wants to use the inn as a model for a national inclusive tourism program." News from the farm warmed Raphael's heart, as he missed the project they had built together. But his focus remained firm on Eleanor's treatment, now in the 4th month of the 6-month program. It was on a Thursday afternoon during a particularly intense physical therapy session that the first major breakthrough happened. Eleanor, supported between parallel bars and using a special brace, managed to take 2 small steps before her legs gave way. "Daddy, I walked," she cried, her eyes shining with emotion as she was supported by the physical therapist. Raphael, who had been watching the session holding his breath, couldn't hold back his tears. Those 2 small steps represented much more than physical progress. They were the materialization of the hope that had brought them there. "That's right, Princess," he managed to say between sobs. "You're amazing." The news was celebrated in a video call with Louisa and Leona, who cried with them on the other side of the screen. That small victory gave everyone renewed encouragement for the final months of treatment. Progress continued, still slow, but steady. Eleanor gradually gained more control over her leg movements, although she still relied on her wheelchair most of the time. The doctor's prognosis was cautiously optimistic. With continuous therapy, she might eventually use crutches or a walker for short distances. As the 6th month of treatment drew to a close, Raphael and Eleanor received a surprise visit. Louisa arrived at the apartment in Los Angeles, carrying not only luggage but also a large mysterious envelope. "I have something to show you," she announced after the hugs and kisses of reunion. She opened the envelope and spread architectural plans on the living room table. "It's the design for our new house." Raphael and Eleanor leaned over the drawings, intrigued. "But we already have the farm," Raphael commented. "The farm is the inn now," Louisa explained. "It's doing so well that it no longer makes sense for us to live in the main house. Guests need that space." She pointed to a specific spot on the plans. "Here on this part of the property, near the spring we recovered with the old documents, we're going to build our house. Fully adapted for Ellie, with enough space for all of us, and isolated enough for privacy, but close enough for us to manage the inn." Eleanor leaned over her chair to get a better look at the drawings. "Is there a room just for me? And a ramp for the pool?" "It has all that and more," Louisa confirmed, showing the details of the project. "Mark helped us with the financing. Construction has already begun, actually. I wanted it to be a surprise." Raphael hugged her, feeling a wave of gratitude and love. "You thought of everything." "I always do," she smiled. "And there's one more thing." She took a small box from her pocket. "This is for you, Ellie." The girl opened the box, finding a small golden key tied to a colorful ribbon. "What does it open?" "Nothing, for now," Louisa explained. "But when the house is ready, this will be the key to the main door. Because it's your house too, built for you." The emotion on Eleanor's face was worth more than any words. She held the key against her chest, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. 2 weeks later, the treatment program officially ended. The doctors outlined a continuity plan for when they returned to the Coffee Valley, including daily exercises and monthly visits to a physical therapist in the nearest town. On the eve of their departure, they had a picnic at Griffith Park, celebrating not only the end of this stage, but the beginning of a new phase in their lives. Eleanor surprised everyone by managing to stand alone for almost a minute, supported only by a light walker. "When we get home, I'll show Charlotte," she said, proud. "And then I'll plant new flowers in my garden." The return journey to the Coffee Valley had a completely different atmosphere from the departure. Where there had once been anxiety and uncertainty, now there was the tranquility of someone returning home with new stories to tell and new dreams to fulfill. When the bus began to climb the winding roads of the mountainous region, Eleanor pressed her face against the window, eager for the first glimpse of the farm. Finally, after a bend, St. Clair Estate appeared on the horizon, its vibrant blue walls standing out against the green hills. "Look, Daddy, it looks even prettier." Raphael smiled, sharing his daughter's feeling. The farm really did look different, more alive, more prosperous. Colorful pennants decorated the entrance, and he could see movement in the chalets and gardens, indicating the presence of guests. Leona was waiting for them at the entrance, along with Charlotte, Mr. Arthur, and several other familiar faces. Banners that read "Welcome Back" stretched across the veranda of the main house, now transformed into the inn's reception. When the car stopped, Eleanor could barely contain her excitement. "Can I try with the walker? Can I try to walk a little for them to see?" Raphael exchanged a look with Louisa, both moved by the request. "Of course you can, Princess. Let's go slowly." Carefully, Raphael helped Eleanor position herself with the special walker they had brought from Los Angeles. Louisa stood nearby, ready to support if necessary. The small crowd waiting for them fell silent, watching intently. Step by step, with intense concentration on her childlike face, Eleanor advanced along the path of flat stones leading to the veranda. They were small, hesitant, but determined steps. Raphael walked just behind, his hands ready to hold his daughter but allowing her to experience the moment. When she finally reached Leona, who was waiting with tears in her eyes, a spontaneous round of applause erupted from the spectators. Charlotte, from her own wheelchair, applauded more enthusiastically than anyone. "You did it, Ellie!" her older friend shouted. That night, a special celebration was organized in the inn's common area. Leona prepared a feast with all of Eleanor and Raphael's favorite dishes. Guests and friends from the region joined the celebration, creating an atmosphere of joy and community that perfectly defined the spirit of St. Clair Estate. During the party, Mark asked for everyone's attention for a special toast. "When I met this unusual family," he began, "I saw only a good business, an inclusive inn in a region that needed this type of initiative. What I didn't imagine is that I would also find a lesson about new beginnings." He raised his glass. "To the Miller-Silver family, who teach us that the best constructions are not made only of bricks and wood, but of courage, love, and the willingness to open the door when the unexpected knocks." After the celebration, when most of the guests had already left, Raphael took Eleanor to see the land where the new house was being built. Under the moonlight, the already visible foundations promised the home Louisa had designed for them. "What do you think, Princess? It's going to be our new home." Eleanor observed the space for a moment, holding the small golden key that hadn't left her neck since she received it. "It's going to be perfect, Daddy. But you know, I think we're already home, aren't we? Home is where we are together." Raphael smiled, impressed once, again by the wisdom that sometimes came from his daughter's lips. "You're absolutely right." 3 months later, the new house was ready. A modern construction perfectly integrated into the natural landscape, with large windows framing the view of the valley and accessibility adaptations that seemed an organic part of the design, not later additions. The move from the main farmhouse to the new residence happened on a sunny spring day. Eleanor, who continued to progress with physical therapy, could already take several steps with her walker and spend longer periods out of her wheelchair. On the morning of the move, something happened that Raphael and Louisa had secretly discussed for weeks. As they organized the last belongings, Raphael called Eleanor to the veranda of the main house. "Princess, I have something important to ask you." The girl, now 7, looked at him curiously. "You know that Louisa and I love each other very much, don't you?" Eleanor nodded, smiling. "Of course I know, Daddy. Everyone knows. And you know we love you very much too." "I know." "Well," he continued, kneeling to be at his daughter's eye level, "we're thinking of making it official. Do you know what marriage is? It's when two people who love each other stay together forever, right?" "Exactly. I'm thinking of asking Louisa to marry me. What do you think?" Eleanor's face lit up. "I think that's great, Daddy. Then Louisa will be my real mom?" Raphael smiled. "She already loves you like a mom, Ellie. Marriage will just make it official for everyone." "And Leona? She's going to live with us in the new house too, right?" The girl's concern for the complete family was evident. "Of course, the house has space for all of us." Satisfied with the answer, Eleanor hugged her father tightly. "Okay then, when are you going to ask her to marry you?" "I was thinking of doing it tonight after we finish moving, but it's a secret between us, okay?" "Okay," she promised, with a finger over her lips in a sign of secrecy. The marriage proposal happened at sunset, on the new house's deck overlooking the valley. Raphael had prepared a simple but special dinner with Leona's discreet help. Eleanor, dressed in her best dress, was the one who handed the small blue velvet box to Louisa. "What is this?" Louisa asked, surprised. "Open it," Eleanor encouraged, almost jumping with excitement. Inside the box, a delicate gold ring with a small sapphire, Louisa's favorite stone. "Would you agree to make official what we already feel?" Raphael asked, holding her hand. "To be my wife, to continue being Ellie's second mother, to build our family together no matter what the future brings." With tears in her eyes, Louisa looked at Raphael, then at Eleanor, who watched the scene with anxious eyes. "Yes," she simply replied. "Yes to all that, and much more." The wedding took place 3 months later in the inn's garden. It was a simple ceremony at the town hall, followed by an intimate party for friends and family. Eleanor, proud in her role as flower girl, used her walker decorated with flowers to walk down the aisle to the couple carrying the rings. Leona, who had started a relationship with Peter, the chef she hired to help with her growing catering business, was her sister's maid of honor. St. Clair Estate Inn, now with a waiting list for reservations, closed for an entire weekend for the event. During the party, Raphael found a moment to be alone with his new wife, observing the valley. They had learned to call home. "If someone had told me on that rainy day when I arrived here with Eleanor that I would find not just a house, but an entire family, I would never have believed it, he confessed. Louisa smiled, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. Sometimes life takes us down unexpected paths, like a car breaking down on the road and forcing us to seek shelter in an abandoned house. Or like a desperate man buying his last chance at a new beginning at an auction, he completed, kissing her softly. The party continued into the night, with music, dancing, and the genuine joy of people who had learned to value every good moment after facing so many difficulties. Eleanor, alternating between her wheelchair when she got tired and her walker for special moments, danced with her father, with Louisa, with Leona, and even for a few careful steps with Charlotte, who had inspired her to try the treatment. 2 years after that rainy night when Raphael and Eleanor arrived at St. Clair Estate, finding 2 squatters who would change their lives forever, the property had completely transformed. The inclusive inn was a national reference, inaccessible tourism. Leona's catering business had expanded into a small restaurant on the property, specializing in regional country-style cuisine with organic ingredients from the garden she and Eleanor cultivated together. Louisa and Raphael, in addition to managing the inn, had started a consulting firm in accessible construction, sharing the knowledge acquired in renovating the farm with other entrepreneurs in the region. Eleanor, now 8 years old, attended the local school mainly using her wheelchair, but increasingly confident with her walker for short distances. Her garden in the new house was larger and more diverse, including a small adapted greenhouse, where she cultivated orchids with the help of Mr. Arthur, who had become a kind of surrogate grandfather. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the family gathered on the spacious deck of the house for their traditional afternoon tea ritual. Eleanor excitedly talked about the school project she would develop with Charlotte, now her best friend, and the inn's official accessibility consultant, despite being only 14. We're going to make an illustrated manual on how to adapt spaces for people with reduced mobility, she explained, showing initial drawings. My teacher said we can publish it on the city's website when we finish. Raphael watched his daughter with admiration, recognizing in her the same determination and creativity that had helped him rebuild his life after so many losses. Beside him, Louisa discreetly held an envelope that had arrived that morning, the preliminary results of the adoption process they had started months earlier. Can we tell her now? Louisa whispered, anxious. Raphael nodded, squeezing his wife's hand. I think so. Ellie, Louisa called, we have some news for you. The girl looked at the couple with curiosity. Remember we talked about the possibility of expanding our family, Louisa continued. About bringing a child who needs a home to live with us? Eleanor's eyes sparkled. You're going to adopt a child? Am I going to have a little brother or sister? If all goes well, yes, Raphael confirmed. Actually, they're 2 children. Siblings. Twins? Eleanor asked, instinctively looking at Leona and Louisa. No, they're not twins, Louisa explained, smiling at the association. They're siblings, a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. John has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair like you. Anne is neurotypical. They lost their parents in an accident a year ago and are in a shelter in a city nearby. Eleanor absorbed the information for a moment, processing what it would mean for her life. When are they coming? She finally asked. If everything goes well with the process, maybe in 3 or 4 months, Raphael replied. But before that, we'll visit them a few times to get to know each other. I can show John how cool it is to use a wheelchair here, Eleanor exclaimed, already planning. We'll have to make more ramps in the garden and maybe adapt another room and... Leona laughed at her niece's excitement. Slow down, little architect, one thing at a time. The conversation continued, with plans and ideas emerging naturally. Peter, now Leona's fiancé, joined them later, bringing a chocolate cake he had made especially for the occasion. The news of the possible adoption was celebrated by everyone, including Mr. Arthur, who appeared for his traditional Sunday visit. At night, with Eleanor already asleep and the house quiet, Raphael and Louisa sat on the veranda, contemplating the stars that seemed infinite in the rural sky. The soft lights of the inn glowed in the distance, reminding them of the journey they had taken. Sometimes I still wonder how all this happened, Raphael confessed, embracing his wife. How two strangers I found living illegally in my house became the family I didn't even know I needed. Louisa smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. I think some houses have that power, to bring people together, to heal wounds, to create possibilities. Or maybe it's the people who have that power, he suggested, to turn a house into a home, to build bridges over chasms, to start over when it seems impossible. As the night deepened, and the Coffee Valley fell asleep under the starry blanket, St. Clair Estate remained a symbol of renewal and hope. A property that had almost fallen into oblivion now pulsed with life and purpose, just like the people who had found there not just a roof, but a true home. And it all began with a simple decision, not to close the door to the unexpected, to welcome instead of reject, to believe that even in the most improbable circumstances, the human heart is still capable of recognizing in others the chance for a new beginning. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Raphael, Eleanor, Louisa, and Leona has warmed your hearts and shown that families can be formed by the most unexpected bonds. To continue being moved by stories that celebrate resilience and love, be sure to check out our special New Beginnings playlist, available right here. If this narrative touched you, show your appreciation by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Also share in the comments if you have witnessed or experienced a transformation as profound as that of St. Clair Estate. Your story could be the next to inspire thousands of people.